We have a couple of different non-categorizable transitions in these answer choices, but it doesn't really bother me. Let's just go right to the sentences and see if there's a natural way to connect them. In 2014, Nestor Gomez won his first ever storytelling competition, relating a tale about his life as a Guatemalan immigrant living in Chicago. In 2017, Gomez created the show 80 Minutes Around the World as a platform for others to share stories about their immigration experiences. So these just seem like two kind of things about this guy, Nestor Gomez, right? They're just kind of like little facts about him, I guess. So I certainly don't see an instead, which is kind of like a but. They don't seem to be a contrast. He wrote about being a Guatemalan immigrant. He created something about being an immigrant. So that seems to be a similarity, if anything. Now, it's not an example, though, either, because what would it be an example of? He won this storytelling competition. And then the second thing is a show. It's not an example of the storytelling competition, so that just doesn't really fit. But for example is one of our four main categories. Now later just means later. First this thing happened, then something else happened. And when we use these time transitions, we're going to get some sort of clue in the passage that time is passing. And oh boy, it's obvious, right? In 2014, he did one thing. Later, in 2017, he did something else. That feels pretty right to me. And in other words is also a transition that kind of doesn't really fit into one of the categories, but it does mean what it says, right? In other words, we're going to take what we just said and we're going to put it in other words. But that's not happening here because it's a completely different thing. So it's not about the storytelling competition anymore. It's a new thing. So there's no other words that we could use to describe it. We've moved on. So you probably intuitively understood this, but I do think this easy question is a good way to remind us that, yeah, sometimes weird transitions come in, ones that are not in one of those four main categories that we see again and again. And that's okay. That shouldn't mean that they're harder. It just means that we can use the categories to kind of classify some of the other choices. And then we might have to go outside of the categories to pick the one right answer. But there will always be clues, usually very obvious clues telling us what we need to do to connect the two sentences.